Good afternoon, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to welcome all of you in Moscow, all the participants and guests of traditional investment forum, Russia Calling. This is the 10th session. This year, forum has once again gathered the heads of leading Russian and foreign companies, investment funds, renowned specialists and experts who have their professional activities tied to Russia. They are showing interest in our country. Before turning to discussion, I would like to briefly describe the present stance and situation of Russian economy. On the whole, it's really stable. According to assessments during the January-September period, the GDP of Russia has increased on 1.5%. And we see advanced growth rates in industrial manufacturing, plus 3% through January-September period. And in manufacturing industry, we see plus 3.2%. We have key indicators on lower levels. I'm speaking about inflation and unemployment. Unemployment is 4.7% and inflation at around 3.5%. According to focus and evaluations of central bank, maybe Ms. Nabiulina has already mentioned this, we are planning around 4% now. As far as I remember, it is 3.5%. Despite the intense of external pressure, certain internal difficulties, however, Russian business is making long-standing plans in stepping up relevant development investments. The volume of investments to fixed assets during the January-September period has grown 4.1%, and this business optimism of investors, their positive attitude, is an important indicator of the confidence of business, and we truly appreciate it. We continue supporting this attitude. Of course, it is evident that present economic growth rates are insufficient for dramatically raising the living standards of our citizens. We understand it, we realize it, and in order to change the situation, we are working on development programs. As I already mentioned, the goal that we have is to achieve higher growth rates that we see in the world, to establish ourselves in the 5 major economies of the world. The basis for this breakthrough dynamics should be laid by the solution of structural issues. First, I mean the increase in labor productivity. First of all, through introducing modern, more efficient technologies on non-primary goods economy sectors. We also will be improving our system of vocational training, will assure permanent improvement of competence and efficient further professional training. Second, we'll allocate sufficient and significant resources and will allocate and give all our assistance for the private companies and for the development of infrastructure, motorways, railroads, sea and river ports, air transportation, energy, communications. Throughout all these directions, we will multiply, I underscore multiply our efforts. We will level up the connectivity of our country through user-friendly and safe communications. I would underscore that it will be important for more active participation of Russia in international economic relationship in order to build up exporting capabilities of our country. Third, in recent years, we'll do everything that we can in order to assure advanced growth of digital economy. Will lay legal and technological basis in order to implement digital solutions in the system of public administration. We already launched this process, and we are achieving significant successes here in utilities and in city services, in industries and transport, in education and in healthcare. We'll continue creating brand new branches and business platforms on the basis of digital technologies. We'll encourage the establishment and development of Russian companies that will be global leaders of digital era. And of course, in order to achieve investment growth, in order to attract capitals to Russian economy, we'll continue improving the business environment, reducing administrative burden on entrepreneurs, and offer our investors new, more adequate mechanisms for their business expansion. Of course, the implementation of plans for developing economic potential of our country would require large-scale investments from our country. Maybe you've heard these numbers. I would like to just mention that during the period of 2019-2021, we'll allocate 2.3 trillion rubles for these goals. I would like to point out that despite the expenses growth, we have not weakened the budgetary policy of our country. And in future, we'll preserve this responsible approach towards financial management. We'll assure necessary balance of revenues and expenses of public budgets. This long-term predictability of macroeconomic finance and monetary policy, of course, is extremely important for Russian and foreign investors. Well, that's what I would like to say at the outset, ladies and gentlemen. As I understand, we will have discussion. I will be at your service. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much, Mr. Putin. Thank you so much for attending this forum. We have now our 10th session. I would just like to take 2 minutes of your attention and attention of the participants. I would like to remind you how we started all of this. It is related to the creation of an investment bank named VTB Capital that was established 10 years ago in the period of world crisis when many investment banks have shrunken their activities. Of course, we've asked leading experts and specialists. I talked to the head of Deutsche Bank, Joseph Ackermann. He's a renowned bank specialist, and he told me, Andrei, when you see Mr. Putin, please tell him that a great country cannot exist without investment bank. And when I visited Mr. Putin, he's been the prime minister there, he first approved this initiative, and then he asked what could be his help. And I just thought about 3 desires as a fairy tale. But then I recall that as if I have many desires, the fairy tale's end will be not so good. Then I asked him, could he please attend our conference? Because back then, any investment bank had their own conferences, and I asked him not to attend another conferences of another banks. Well, he didn't respond about other banks, but he was positive, and he said that he would attend our conference and forum. But I could not even imagine that after 10 years, throughout these 10 years, Mr. Putin, despite his tight agenda, despite the weather, he would attend each and every our session and our investment forum. And I think that thanks to this, our forum is a leading one, and all of you are coming here to talk to Mr. Putin and to hear from him. The first forum that you attended had 30 investors. Now we have more than 1,200 of them from many countries throughout the world. And I hope that your efforts will not be in vain, because this great country, Russia, has a solid investment bank. So thank you so much for your support and assistance throughout these years. So, dear colleagues, now we'll pass to questions. We have democracy. Mr. Putin can himself select who will be asking the question. But the first question is not what we've prepared. That's the paper Wall Street Journal. They have an interesting question. One of the key targets of your government to raise the share of investment to 25% of GDP. Last goals of that type were not successful. What has changed now? Why do you think that now this goal is more realistic today and now? Well, we've spoke about this at the morning, and Mr. Kudrin said that when we are working and we are not complying with some goals, we've been punished. But when we are not complying with strategic goals, no one is responsible for this. Who will be responsible for this, Mr. Putin? This is my additional question. After 5 years, who will you be asking from? Well, first of all, I think that colleagues are coming here not in order to look at me or hear from me. I'm not the monument of Moscow, or not a place of interest. They can talk to each other, communicate to each other, because that's extremely important to talk to your colleagues, to talk to your government, talk to governments and central banks to feel what Russia breathes with. Well, the difference between 2008 and 2018 is significant, because we had crisis back then, and now we are living through difficult times, and these crises was provoked by different circumstances. But now, as I see it, we have an understanding that despite all these circumstances and artificially created difficulties, Russian economy has already adapted to those difficulties. It feels self-confident, it creates conditions for internal development, and as I see it, is the factor which I mentioned from the podium. We see the GDP growth at the level of 1.5%, and the investments to the fixed assets are advancing. It's 4.1%. It says that we can see that investors are confident in their future, the future of their work in the Russian Federation. They understand that the Russian policy is stable, sustainable, and predictable, and it is resilient to external shocks or external factors. And many factors are speaking about this, which I mentioned. As for the punishment, well, as it usually happens, you may know it, you may know this phrase. After everything, we are always awarding those who not participated in this and punishing those who were not guilty. But we don't have to think about who is guilty. We have to think about what should we do additionally in order to implement ambitious goals that we have. And we have this plan. Thank you so much. So, dear colleagues, please, you have an opportunity to ask a question. It's an opportunity for direct dialogue.
Так, давайте, микрофоны. Давайте.
Ну, давайте первым.
Вот,
So, please, number one. So, number one, yeah.
This is Ertan Akbulut from Turkey, and I would like to ask you, there has been much discussions about moving away from the dollar to achieve greater diversification, whether to make payments, to engage the foreign trade or foreign reserve purposes. Interestingly, one of the impediments to this are governments themselves. They keep signing agreements in dollars, whether they are for loans or for trade, and they continue to keep the currency for reserve management. Russia is no exception. What can governments do to support this diversification? Thank you very much.
У нас нет цели
Well,
уходить.
we don't have a goal to go away from the dollar. Dollar goes away from us.
И те, кто принимают
And those who adopt these decisions, they are shooting not to their foot, but a bit up,
потому что такая
because
нестабильность
this instability in dollar payments
очень многих
is the reason that many economies of the world are trying to find alternative reserve currencies, and they are seeking for a system that will be independent from dollar. It's not only about us. We see what happens in the world. Look at the shrinking of gold reserve of the countries, including closest allies of the US. Dollar assets are shrinking. You can see the reports. All of this is in the reports, even among the largest holders of these dollar assets. That's the result of this policy of using sanctions, including with the use of dollar. I think sooner or later they would realize it, but as of now, the world is facing this phenomenon in economy, and we will continue seeking for alternatives for payments and accumulating reserves. We are doing this as well as many other countries. Well, we have the market already established, for example, in the oil. But still, when thinking on resolving one or another problem or issue, those problems will be solved at the end of the day. For example, with the countries of Eurasian Economic Union, we have 70% of our import served in ruble and 70% of export and 30% of import. We are doing it in rubles. With some countries, we are now actively working with our major trade partners in order to establish systems that will be independent from SWIFT system. We are working on assuring the movement of goods.
Я только что разговаривал
Well, I've just spoken to the president of Turkey with the leader of your country, well, just 30 minutes ago.
мы говорили сегодня
We've touched upon some specific moments, but I just would like to recall our deal in the area of military cooperation in the S-400. If we will pay this in dollar, that wouldn't work out. Then we invented another option, but we have our deal.
и так будет по-любому.
And that would happen with any goods. This is just one of the outstanding examples. The same would happen with other goods.
У нас нет
That's why we don't have any goal to move away from the dollar. We just have to do this. We are obliged to do this. And we'll continue doing this, but not because governments don't want to do this. That's because we don't want to make any sharp steps that will be in detriment for us, for ourselves. But in order to make the world economy more stable, more predictable, and in order to make payments more efficient and stable, of course, we need to look for some alternative ways, and we'll do it. Thank you. So, dear colleagues, other questions, please?
Пожалуйста. Пожалуйста, наши. Британские инвесторы, по-моему, там нет?
I think we have some British investors over there.
Давайте. Пожалуйста.
Yes, my name is Raymond Zuccaro. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at RVX Asset Management based in the United States. We focus on emerging markets globally. But I really consider myself a student of history, and when I look at what you've done for Russia, Mr. Putin, is I think in the history books you'll be regarded much like Peter the Great, restoring Russia to a world power, stopping the European encroachment on the near abroad. And at the same time, being an American citizen, I often wonder when lack of understanding from the U.S. Policies and understanding of the world. I was given this gift by my coverage at formerly of VTB Capital, now at Extelis, Pavel, which commemorates your summit with President Trump in Helsinki. This coin it was printed in the United States. It has grammatical errors. It has spelling mistakes in Russia. My question for you is really, what would you tell the leaders of my country to better understand the Russian history, to better understand their perspective, your perspective, so our countries can get along better in the future?
Ну, вы как историк
Well, you, being a historian, of course, you know that in order to know the history, you have to learn it and study the history. You just have to read it. There's nothing difficult about this. And then it will be clearer, the motives and the reasons of your partners. That's a useful thing to do, and it will be really interesting. I mean, the history is really interesting. We all know these ideas that in order to know what would happen in the future, we have to know our past. As for the present day, I would not give any advice, because it's really a hard thing to do. You said that Russia is a great country, but the US is also a great country. 300 million people living there, the major economy of the world. In fact, the only universal reserve currency is there, I mean the US dollar. They are spending $700 billion for the defense. We are spending just 46 billion. And the US is spending 700. It's more than the expenses of all the countries in the world for their defense programs. Of course, this is a great country, and that's how we consider the US, but we have to respect each other. And we have to demonstrate this respect in our specific actions. We've just mentioned certain limitations in dollar payments, or different sanctions or customs tariffs that are being imposed towards different countries, for example, towards China. According to estimates of World Trade Organization, mutual limitations that have been imposed by the G20 countries have led to the shrinkage of the world trade by around $500 billion. Is anyone interested in this? Including the economy of the United States. Well, this creates new possibilities for us, for our country. For example, will be important soy to the United States, to China, I'm sorry, and now will be important poultry to our partners and other agricultural goods instead of the U.S. The United States are going away from this market. I think that we have to try to seek a positive results for ourselves without detrimenting the partner, but trying to find joint areas of activities in order to be more efficient in our joint work, and we'll be benefiting from this, all of us.
While unilateral and politically motivated and illegitimate in terms of international trade law and harmful actions, everyone will lose. What sort of advice can I give? Just abandon such policy and look for connecting points. We stand ready for this. I have mentioned it on many occasions that I hope if I happen to talk to President Trump in Argentina, I'll talk about it there. I feel it, and he also told me the same thing in Paris. We had a lunch together, and we were sitting opposite each other for around an hour. We were talking together, not just with him, with our colleagues sitting around us. As far as I understand, President Trump is quite positive, and we need to find the connecting points that I've mentioned. However, it doesn't depend only on myself. We need to find a general consensus. It's needed within the U.S. administration, which would make the U.S. administration willing to cooperate with its partners.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Basatne. I'm the CEO of BB Energy Trading. My question really relates to the relationship between OPEC and Russia. Over the past few years, there's been a lot of collaboration regarding the curtailment of production. And of course, the main issue here is that many people believe that that's at the cost or at the advantage of the shale oil industry. I would like to get your view on that. As well, on the same token, because of this curtailment of production, some might argue that that does affect directly the technology and innovation in the Russian oil sector. How do you see that going forward? And do you believe that this strategy is a long-term strategy for Russia to keep on curtailing the production at the cost of other players?
Вы знаете, что мы выстроили работу со
Well,
странами.
you know that we have established cooperation with OPEC member states, 15 member states, and 12 countries that are non-OPEC member states agreed to work together on the world markets in order to balance the supply and demand. And I should say that for the first time, I think it's for the first time in history of this organization, that we managed to do so by 100%. All agreements have been fulfilled by 100%. It has never been seen before in this organization, never. And I should say that it happened largely thanks to the position of Saudi Arabia. So we have to thank the Crown Prince and Saudi Arabia for this. He was initiator of such work, and it gave positive results. As for shale oil, we've never had, and I hope we'll never, at least Russia, will not have a goal in future to undermine those dealing with shale oil production. However, we needed to balance the market and increase the price to a level where the sector itself becomes viable and can re-attract investments. The danger was that investments into this sector will stop, and that's exactly what happened. And then the prices would inevitably surge. it will be destructive both for producers and consumers. So our goal was to make sure that we work together in a soft manner, both to the benefit of producers and consumers. We managed to do so. As far as I remember, in 2013, the price was at around 43, and currently it's 72 in the first 10 months. Now the price dropped again, then it rose a bit, but I think the level of some 60 would be comfortable for us, because we balance our budget at the level of 40 for the next year. We have calculated the $43 per 1 barrel. And the point at which shale oil production is economically interesting is at the level of $35 to $40, or maybe 45. So the price I'm talking about is balanced, and it is a fair price. And if needed, we are now in contact with OPEC. If needed, we will continue this joint work.
Your Excellency, friends here, my name is Ravi Ruya. I'm the co-founder of the SR Group in India, along with my brother Shashi Ruya. Your Excellency, we are involved in the SR Group in different businesses. We are in the oil refining and exploration business, in steel manufacturing, in power generation, in port and infrastructure, and metals and mining. Our total revenues are around $15 billion a year. Excellency, in the last 2 years, with the active cooperation and assistance of VTB Bank, we have been instrumental in bringing in a large investment from the state-owned oil company Rosneft into India, which has given access to Russia to a very large fuels market in India of over 1.25 billion people. The total investment was almost $13 billion, which is the largest ever investment made by a Russian private company into the Indian private sector, and has given a big, major outlet for potentially Russian crude into India and access to over 4,000 to 5,000 retail gas stations in India, where the product will be directly given to the Indian consumer. Excellency, we are also looking at seeing how else we can now bring in more Russian investment into India, which would add to the growth both of the Indian market and access to the Indian population, as well as add to Russian export. For instance, in the power generation sector, India, we generally believe that there's a large potential for Russian power equipment to come into India as the Indian power generation is growing. So this is the background about our group. We are now looking, Your Excellency, my question to you, Your Excellency, is that the economic growth in India is at 1.5%, and when the oil price has recovered, what measures do you envisage to take it to a sustainable higher level of 3%? Thank you.
Not in India, in Russia. 1.5%. Okay.
Как от 1,5% в России до 3% просто увеличить.
Да. Ну, во-первых, хочу сказать, что
Well, first I'd like to say that indeed we have friendly and constructive relations with India. Our friendly and personal relations with Prime Minister Mr. Modi contribute to this. He's a very serious politician, and In a full sense of word, he is a reliable partner. To a large extent, thanks to his efforts, we've been developing our relations in many fields. However, we are not happy with the current level. It's not in line with the potential of either India or Russia. We can achieve a manifold increase of our economic ties and mutual investments. One of investments, as you have mentioned, it's the major investments in the history of foreign investments into Indian economy. Our company acquired 12 billion, if I'm not mistaken, $12 billion. It was an investment of one of the greatest refineries in India, and I hope it's not the last investment of this kind. Of course, we will welcome Indian investments into Russia. We know that Indians work quite effectively in the pharmaceuticals. We'll welcome further expansion of such work, but not only in this field. You've also mentioned power production. Machine building for power generation purposes is well developed in Russia. In some sectors of the market, much remains to be done. For example, we need to establish production of certain products. But by and large, we have good technologies and the high quality. We have good personnel and good training possibilities, so we can work efficiently in this field. As for achieving a greater pace of economic cooperation, I've mentioned from this very platform today that we have a whole program to achieve greater economic growth. First of all, we need to achieve greater labor productivity based on cutting-edge technologies, including digital technologies. We also need to develop our infrastructure, education, and healthcare. For example, if we take infrastructure, we plan significant increase of passing capacities of motor roads. We'll spend for it great resources that have been allocated for the following 5 to 6 years. We also plan to greatly increase the capacity of railroads of the Russian Federation. I mean that we will export some of our products, for example, coal and oil. I'm talking about pipeline transportation, also natural gas. We'll build up port infrastructure, for example, and most particular in the Far East and in Siberia. We'll also develop seaports. For example, in 2013, the transshipment amounted to 300 million tons, and last year, for the first time in history, we achieved the level of 1 billion tons. And it's not the end. This field will only develop, and we will greatly increase our investments into healthcare and education, because without a healthy and educated people, it's hardly possible to achieve good final results. We'll work with internet so that even the smallest village has an internet connection. So this toolbox is planned in the framework of our so-called national projects, and I very much hope that it will give us the result we need.
Можно вот туда, вот, шестой, вот, господин Генерал, да? Не ошибаюсь, отсюда вижу. Да-да, вот.
Thank you. Ewan Thompson from Neptune Investment Management in London. You mentioned the plans to increase the investment rate in the Russian economy, whilst also maintaining fiscal strength. How do you see the capacity of the Russian banking sector to help accelerate the economy? What role will it play in financing this growth? Thank you very much.
Мы полностью отдаем себе отчет в том,
We are completely aware of the potential capacities of our banking system and how it compares with the global banks with their resources and current opportunities, with what they can do and how they develop. We have some leading banks. VTB Bank is one of them. We see some difficulties that banks are facing. We also see the achievements and successes. The central bank has been strengthening the Russian banking system over the past years. Sometimes it affects people, it may hurt, but it's made in the interests of the Russian people to make sure that the Russian banking system, financial institutions where people save their money, are efficient. We have adopted some laws in order to ensure the interests of those who deposit their money. We also took the decision to divide the licenses. Now there are two kinds of licenses requiring different capital levels from different banks. If I'm not mistaken, it's 1.3 billion. Ms. Nabiulin is sitting close to you. She will tell you how we call it the general license and a second sort of license. The difference is that regional banks should have a lower burden in terms of reserves and other requirements in terms of capital. We believe that regional banks should have a chance to work in a more flexible manner. I hope that's how it will be, and governors ask us for us and suggest us these actions. On the whole, the income is quite good, the profits are good. 19 trillion rubles is the accumulated capital over the first 9 months of this year. The profit was of around 1.3 trillion rubles. So we see what's happening and we know what we need to do to strengthen our banking system.
Yes, Jean-Pierre Thomas, advisor of the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy for the cooperation between France and Russia, and now President of Thomas Vendôme Investment. Mr. President, I will ask you a question about these useless sanctions. Is there finally some positive side of this sanction on the Russian economy you will comment and we can work on? Because we read that, for example, we are very successful story of import substitution in the sector of agriculture, of agro sector, and other sector of the Russian economy.
Я уже говорил, я считаю, что...
Well, I have already mentioned and I have already said that any politically motivated and illegitimate, I stress, illegitimate in terms of international law and WTO norms restrictive measures are harmful for everybody, in particular for those who introduce them. You represent France and you have been dealing with cooperation with the Russian Federation. Well, there are some obvious objective things, and statistics testify to this. The EU is our largest trade partner, or at least it was. It now remains our major trade partner. Now we used to have a trade volume of $450 billion. Now this figure is at $236 billion. According to the European Parliament, the reduction of EU supplies to Russia resulted into the loss of 400,000 jobs in the EU. Isn't it a hit against the European economy and people of the European Union? Because it's about families, it's about their income, their children. That's what's the final result. Obviously, it affects us in a negative manner. But at the same time, there are some positive sides too, but mostly they are negative. they do affect the Russian economy. However, after the Russian economy has obviously adjusted to the circumstances and it has become evident to everybody, we seem to have even more benefits from it. You are an investor and you understand that in the current conditions, with this micro economic policy in place, one can do business and one can have profit. That's what many people do. Many our partners, for example, Kirill Dmitriev, and sitting in front of you, together with our Russian direct investment funds, automatically co-invest any project that one of them takes up. For example, our Russian direct investment fund launches a project, and immediately its partner joins this work too. So their profit is larger than the standard investment. Their profits are 3 to 4 times more than in other markets. That's the result. And it is an example of specific work. As for import substitution, we embraced onto it not because our economy was very successful, but the results were good. Our agricultural output has increased manifold. If we have some Russian agricultural producers here in the audience, they will immediately stand up and say, please don't abandon, don't withdraw Russian sanctions, don't lift them, because it will create additional competition in the Russian market for them. Although internal competition is developing in Russia, and it's playing its anti-monopoly role. We have just mentioned agriculture. Our exports of agriculture in 2013 was at $13 billion. It seemed to be a lot. Over the past 9 months, agricultural exports amount to $21 billion. It's a good result for us, and we have become the major wheat exporter in, not crops, but wheat exporter in the world. Other sectors saw a growth too in agriculture. The most difficult situation was with vegetables. At the same time, this sector is also growing. We need money. It needs money for some sorts of vegetable. However, we have ensured loans, and work is in progress. But it's not only about agriculture. In terms of transport machine building, some 98% of production is produced domestically. Previously, we imported them, and now 95 to 98% are produced in Russia. In automotive, it's about 85%. It's all the result of deep localization that we have agreed with our partners, in particular from European countries. In terms of oil and gas equipment, this level is at 98%. However, this figure is growing, and if restrictions are introduced, we'll respond to it. And this figure will increase if someone wishes it. If someone wishes to close for himself the Russian market with their own hands. I'm not talking about military equipment. There we have almost completely abandoned any imports. Twice a year I meet with representatives of the Russian armed forces and military equipment producers. We meet for the whole week in Sochi and discuss the topical issues. Last year, 600 billion rubles were invested into military equipment production. a large part of it from the budget funds. So work is in progress. However, I would like the normal regime of world trade and economic life to be resumed. Over there, number 5, please.
Michael Henry from Wellington Management in Boston. Thank you very much for being here today and the thoughtful comments. My question to you is to look forward a little bit. You're obviously...
Руку поднимите. А где? Вот да, вижу. Да-да, все, вижу. Извините, пожалуйста.
You're obviously the most dominant figure in Russia domestically, politically, and the face of Russia abroad. But I'm wondering if you could tell us what you think Russia would look like the day after President Putin exits the political scene.
Куда вы так спешите? Я пока никуда не собираюсь.
Why are you hurrying so much? I'm not going to leave now.
Но я могу вам сказать так.
But I can tell you this. Already now, Russia is feeling quite confident and we are self-sufficient. However, we are open for cooperation with all our partners, in particular with the United States. And I hope they will realize it at some point, and the need to resolve, to address some common problems and common issues will move us, encourage us for joint work. And as for the way Russia should develop, I have already mentioned that talking from this podium, we have a number of national projects. I hope all of them will be implemented. We have quite ambitious goals, and if we embrace on them quite confidently, the country will change for the better. One more question, please. Number 6.
Yeah? Okay. Jacob Grappengisser from VTB Capital. I wanted to ask you a bit about the relationship with the Ukraine. First of all, maybe a bit on the incident in the Kerch Strait, what really happened there, and why these vessels were kind of taken into Russian custody. Secondly, there are elections in the Ukraine next year. Do you think there will be some kind of anti-Russian propaganda or campaigning from the Ukrainian politicians to score some points in the elections possibly, and that would lead to further tensions with Russia? And then thirdly, how could you normalize the relationship with Ukraine in the long term?
Что касается этого инцидента
As for this incident in the Black Sea, it is undoubtedly a provocation. It is a provocation initiated by the current authorities and I think by President in the light of upcoming elections due to be held in March next year. The current rating of incumbent president is number 5, and he risks not being in the second round of elections, so he seeks to draw benefits. Why am I thinking, and I'm almost confident that it's like this? Why? The incident in the Black Sea happened. It is a border accident, not more. What happened in 2014 when Crimea took the decision to join Russia? It is a different story, a more large-scale story, or the difficult, a hard event in the southeast of Ukraine, the civil war in Luhansk and Donetsk regions with the use of tanks, hard artillery, and even aviation. It is basically a war, and the martial law wasn't introduced. And now a small accident happened in the Black Sea and martial law was introduced in the country. Well, obviously, it's been done in the light of upcoming presidential elections. It's obvious. Now, as to this incident, or better to say provocation, because obviously, naturally, it was a provocation. In September this year, the same caravan of military ships passed the Kerch Strait under the Kerch bridge and entered the Azov Sea. In accordance with all rules and procedures, they reported their route and their composition. We accompanied them to their final point of destination. What happened now? They did not respond to requests of our border services. They entered our territorial waters, and I would like to stress they entered our territorial waters that have been ours even before Crimea joined the Russian Federation, at a place where we always had Russian territorial waters. They didn't respond to the requests of our border services, and they started moving straight to the bridge. They didn't react to the request to make a hold, and a locksman was offered them. Silence was an answer. What should the border services do in this case when someone invades our territorial waters and doesn't respond to any requests? If the border services had acted in a different way, they should have been persecuted. They ordered in accordance with the law, with the order, in accordance with their functions to protect the territorial security of the Russian Federation. And I'm confident that in your country, such services would have acted in the same way. It turned out that among crew members, 2 security services members were on board, and they confessed they were members of the security services of Ukraine. So all signs are in place of premeditated provocation. It was intended to use it as a pretext to introduce the martial law in the country. It has nothing in common with an attempt to settle the relations between Russia and Ukraine. It is a play for escalation. It is a dirty game within the country in order to suppress political opponents. Sometimes it's strange to me to see it. I'm actually seeing that Ukrainian authorities are now successfully selling anti-Russian sentiments. They have nothing more to sell. And it looks like whatever they do, nothing happens to them. Even if they would require a baby for breakfast today, nothing will happen because they are hungry, they need to eat something. However, it is a short-sighted policy and it won't result in anything good because it relaxes the current Ukrainian leadership. It doesn't encourage them for normal political work within the country and pursue normal economic policy. They have economic problems in the social sphere. They have problems with the finance. They are battling and they're asking for money in the IMF. Sometime, however, they'll have to give this money back. Nothing good is happening in their relations with other organizations. As for the long term, whatever happens and whoever is at power in Ukraine now, the Russian and Ukrainian peoples have always been brother nations, very close nations. This political foam will disappear. And one day the Ukrainian people will give an assessment to the current events, just as Georgian people gave the assessment evaluation to the actions by Mr. Saakashvili. But let's take another question to complete and to finish at a different note.
Спасибо, Андрей Леонидович. Меня зовут Кристофер
Thank
Гранвилл.
you, Andrei Leonidovich. I represent Lombard, and I'm a member of the board of a British investment company bearing in emerging Europe. It has around 100 million of dollars invested into Russian public companies. My question is about the accumulating part for the Russian pension system. You don't need to continue. I understand what you are talking about. I know what you are talking about. I know what you mean. The government took this action so millions of Russian pensioners can win from it, and all the participants of the Russian market that will become less volatile, will have more liquidity and a greater demand. However, 5 years have passed. The cumulative part of the pension is not in place. Mr. Siluanov mentioned this, and I was pleased to hear what he has suggested, but no specific measures are in place so far. Will this project be implemented in a year? Yes, naturally, we do discuss this topic always. We don't close the debates about the pension funds, be it private or state funds. We believe that these funds, the work of these funds, should be organized, and you have just outlined the benefits. They should be organized in a way to make people feel these benefits. People who pay money into these pension funds, they need to be managed in a good manner. People need to feel their benefit from paying money into these funds, so that investment processes, inflation, don't affect these funds. A balanced and effective economic policy needs to be pursued by such funds in order to guarantee the interests of those Russian citizens who have entrusted their money to the pension funds. You can discuss it with the members of the Russian government and central bank. Pensions will rise. Is it? That's for sure. It's settled. Is it a good point to finish? Thank you very much. I would like to thank all those present here. So, Mr. Putin, if I may ask you, will you please join us for the coming decade too? Are you now discussing with your colleague from Boston? Thank you very much for having come here.